the soil, and the soil absorbed all the water. And then they regrounded everything, put in these drip lines, but behind this is rebar and concrete. It's shored up. And then these things are put every so often. This is what they do now so that if water does get in there, it can release out. And the sandstone, it's a mix. What was old and still in decent shape and could be reused, they reused. What was not is new sandstone. And if you look, you can kind of tell, like this is a new piece, this is an old piece. Often the new pieces will have, even though they tried to round the corners, they'll have sharper corners.
It's a lack of oxidation that really gives it away.
Yeah, yeah. So it's new all the way up, and then they put a sandstone barrier up there on the top, and
yeah, that looks so much better.
yeah,
it
just
just
unbelievable.
looks tight and actually competent.
Yeah.
No, I mean there were just huge blocks. It's like I could walk
Yeah.
out like that block right
It was
there.
like
It's
powder.
I could pull
Yeah.
that right out, take it home, put it in my garden. It was bad.
And they measured them and put them back in the same area they were, even though it's completely rebuilt. But we did try, because it was kind of dark and cold and kind of the haunted castle look, we tried to pull and warm it up, and actually a lot of these colors that are in these lichens and moss and things, you'll see in, like, you know, the color of the windows or the color of the stucco, or these different things, these decisions that have been made to kind of warm it up.
Super. What
Okay, questions? Yeah.
do students have?
So I know earlier we were talking about like environmental architecture and how this is one of like the most environmentally sound buildings in all of the North End. So like with Boise's population growth, are we seeing more and more environmentally safe architecture, or is that kind of secluding this because it was just a special project?
I think we could do a lot better as a city, and depending on how this next election turns out, we might get there. Some things that we definitely don't have here is any type of buy all used clothes. You can dumpster dive to get the, you do all that stuff, and so you've got a very low carbon footprint, but it means nothing if your entire community isn't doing it. So that's a great question, and I think there's a lot more that can be done. But frankly, I don't understand why we're allowing people to build houses without mandatory solar panels. That's just insanity. Every day, we get 300 days of this, the sun shining. I've got a buddy who's got a cabin that he hand built in Oregon, and he runs the whole thing off two panels. And by 9 o'clock in the morning, his batteries are 100%. And even in twilight, there's enough coming in that it's actually still charging the batteries to make it all the way through to the next one. So the short answer to your question is no, we can do better. But the only way that we're going to do better is I hope all of you guys are registered to vote. I hope that you are providing input into the people who seek to be your leaders, and frankly spend your money. You guys are going to be getting paychecks, and if you take a look at that paycheck, here's your whole paycheck, but you're going to get this much. Well, the gap in between, that's taxes, and the people that are elected, they're the ones who are spending that effectively. And so coding is developing codes to allow for those things, and not even allow for it, but drive it, specifically drive it, is really what we need. And we don't have that yet. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but our entire valley, Treasure Valley, is going to have over 1 million people in it by 2040. So not only is that going to be important for our housing stock to become a little bit more green and a little bit more efficient, but also everything we do around transportation is going to be utterly critical. So, great question.
Other questions?
Are you planning on installing energy-saving appliances in the building once you're done?
We have looked at everything from going like LEED certified. The problematic thing with that is the cost goes up even more. it would be wonderful. We have had to raise every penny to get this far. So we chose not to do LEED certification. If I was individually wealthy and was privately funding this, I would do it that way, but I'm not. We have to go around asking people for money. I wish there was a program like the Brownfields has for historic preservation. There isn't. I wish they say if you're taking a endangered historic site, making it viable once again, we will give you federal dollar. There isn't. And so there is not a lot of financial incentive to do historic preservation. I will tell you, it is cheaper, and you would get a lot more value for your money to build new. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So because of that, we are doing the best we can, but we're like, let's save it, let's get value engineered occupancy, and then see where we're at to do things we can in the future to help that. But it really is very value engineered. It's nothing, I mean, there's going to be plumbing, electrical, lighting, heating, air conditioned. It's going to be like a big open warehouse in there that's up to code and occupancy. But there aren't even appliances in it. There aren't. So it's
To
just
your
a big
point,
warehouse.
though, and that's a really good question. Ultimately, if you can put in appliances, all of your heating and cooling infrastructure, and make it as green and sustainable as possible, can be very expensive up front. But over the life of the building, the life of those appliances, you're actually saving money. Jon is constrained by upfront costs, massively so. But if we were living in a place that had ordinances that forced these things, or we had state statutes that forced these things or incentivized them in some way, we could get there. So the way you get to that is public policy. And I know it's not a satisfying answer right now because it doesn't solve this issue. But again, if Jon put in, all platinum LEED and, all of the top rated Energy Star appliances, that's great for this building. What about everything that's going in downtown? What about everything that's going in Meridian? It sort of doesn't matter at that point. So you got to drive it. You have to drive it through policy, ordinances, and statutes. And for people who can't afford it, you try to maybe monkey with your tax code a little bit to provide incentives for those things to get done.
There are some things we've just naturally discovered that we know will be going down that path, like for instance the basement.
Yeah.
Even during the hottest heat waves of summer, that basement stays very cool. Like we will not need air conditioning pumped down there at all. We'll need heating, but we will not need air conditioning pumped down there at all. Any other? Did that
Last
kind of answer?
question.
No, yeah, that was perfect.
From
Thank you.
students? Any lingering? So if I was a student and I was interested in getting in brownfield work, what advice would you give me, or what would you suggest that I do to prepare myself for this sort of work?
That's a good question. So I grew up in the Rust Belt. I was born, I wasn't born, I was born in Fort Bragg Army Hospital. But my dad went to Vietnam. I lived in New York for a long time. My whole family's from New York. And so this would have been the early 70s when we were starting to lose a lot of our domestic manufacturing. That was the first major round of losses. Then I moved to Ohio, the Cleveland area, and just watched all kinds of factories go down. And so I grew up seeing brownfields my whole life and being somewhat depressed by them because I lived in the neighborhoods where all of these things were going away, and I saw the socioeconomic impact of that, and it leads to everything: poverty, drugs, crime, all of that starts with loss of jobs in vacant buildings. So that was a natural point for me. I double majored in undergrad, marketing and geology. Sell rocks, haha. Anyway. So that was good for me. Plus, I had the cultural aspect of it. So instead of, my first job was actually with Transocean, and if you guys remember 2012, the big BP spill in the Gulf, they were the people who caused that. So I could have been part of that organization, and I never would have been able to look at myself in the mirror again. I decided to be an environmental geologist because I believed in that. I also was educated enough to know that government regulation does not choke industry or the economy. In fact, you create a set of rules that say you got to do X, Y, and Z. Guess what you've just done? You've created jobs. The simple fact is you have created jobs. There are entire industries that exist now that didn't exist when I was a kid, specifically because of environmental regulation. So if you believe in this type of thing, I think you're in a good program. Generally speaking, it gives you a pretty broad base of skills and knowledge to draw from. You could do engineering. You could do, go into geology and look at fate and transport of contaminants, these types of things. You could go into architecture. There's any number of things that deal with building. You could go into, planning. Planning is a huge part of all of this, right? You could go into historic preservation. There's lots of different ways you can go, but as long as you're doing some level of, public administration or physical science or engineering, it's going to set you up well for this. Marketing set me up very well for this because as a government employee of the Department of Environmental Quality in Idaho, we're kind of a conservative state. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but it's true. And so here I am from the government, one of the most hated agencies in the government, at least at the time, not so much anymore, but historically so. Hey, can I come onto your property and look for contamination so that we can then get it cleaned up? And of course, the natural reaction of most people is like, no, you can't come on my property. If I have contamination, I don't want to know about it. And if I get stuck with the cleanup, I'm going to go broke. So these are the hurdles that you run into. So you can see how marketing or communications or public relations would obviously be of some help too. And believe it or not, I'm a huge introvert. And I don't like selling, but I really, really believed in this program and what it does. And so as it turns out, even if you're the world's biggest introvert, if you believe in what it is you're doing, you can do it. You just need the knowledge, and then you need to be okay with risking failure. One summer I sold books door to door. Horrible. Again, introvert. I don't like selling. I don't like bothering people in any way. And here I'm selling books door to door in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Awful, but great at the same time because it really got me used to having doors slammed in my face and just being like, oh, okay, well that didn't murder me, I'm all right. And then just going to the next door and getting that one slammed in my face. And every 100 doors maybe I can make a sale or have somebody actually let me in. That kind of stuff sets you up for success in this world. Failing at things, trying to do a project and just hitting the dirt. You learn so much from that. You don't learn a lot from success. In fact, it almost sets you up to have a bigger head than you deserve. But nothing is more instructive than failure, especially if you can turn around and learn from it on the back end. But physical sciences, engineering, and then anything in the public sphere that gets you used to figuring out how different government programs work, how you network with those people, and sort of gain some level of synergy so you can use other people's money to do stuff.
Jon, any advice on brownfields from the nonprofit side?
Well, we were incredibly grateful for that program because it came about right when we first started the project as well, and also right when the recession hit, 2007. So public, wealthy people that were giving dollars was low because everyone was like, recession, don't. Whereas the Brownfields program kicked in right then, and it was significant, and it got the ball rolling with this project right off the bat. And so we were incredibly grateful for it. And side note, he's an introvert, he's not going to say this, but Aaron won the Phoenix Award which is given to someone or an individual organization for, like a phoenix, taking something rising out of the dirt for his work on this project by the Idaho, or the Preservation Idaho.
It was the onions and orchids.
Right.
The orchids,
they get onions if you do bad, and orchids, and then Right, he got
Yeah.
the Orchid Award for the work that he did on this. And I'm sorry, I am confusing two awards.
Yeah.
He got the Orchid Award for that.
Great.
Once we get occupancy,
Now then you're going to get the
then
Phoenix
we're
Award.
going to nominate for the Phoenix Award.
That's
yeah.
a big deal. That's a national thing. The Banner Bank building downtown won a Phoenix Award. That was a brownfield site. It used to be a parking garage that had a petroleum tank that was removed, but it leaked a little bit, so it was enough to qualify it as a brownfield. And the 2 points that it got in the lead scoring got them their platinum rating. And so then they ended up with a Phoenix Award. This project will get a Phoenix Award. I think the Esther Simplot Park would be eligible for it, but I don't think the city will go for it because I don't think they would ever want to admit that that was a contaminated site. They're very concerned with public relations.
I remember that.
Yeah, but it'd be a great Phoenix Award. You don't care, so and that would be great. This would be an absolute shoo-in for a Phoenix Award.
Please join me in thanking Jon and Aaron for sharing their story of this site and for giving us this tour. If you are also an introvert and you didn't want to ask a question on camera, they'll probably stick around for a couple minutes so you can ask those. Thank you guys so much.